Hello, I'm Beth. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to do a yoga practice that focuses on the lower body, giving the lower body a little bit of love. Now, if you need some love for the upper body, check out my companion practice, Upper Body Bliss. This is going to be entirely on the floor. We'll start lying down, we'll be kneeling for a bit, and then we'll finish lying again. You might want to have a blanket nearby for comfort and for a few of the things we're going to do at the end of the practice. So lay out your mat and let's come down to lying on your back with the knees bent, feet on the floor. So let yourself start to get comfortable here. Your hands can be resting by your side or on your body. I'm going to start with the feet pretty close together. Feel the back points of your hips on the ground. This practice is going to be a lot of movement around the hip joint. So we're going to start by doing tiny windshield wiper movements with the knees. So letting the knees roll a little bit to one side. I'm coming toward the camera without letting the opposite hip raise off the ground, or at least not very much. And then start to roll the other direction. And you can see as my knees go in this direction, not a lot of movement in my hips. I'm trying to move the legs in the socket. So that femur bone, that top part of the leg bone, the thigh bone, moving around in the hip and pelvic joint, trying to build up to some range of motion, some mobility around that joint. A few more times back and forth. Let's go one more in each direction. Okay, find your knees back in center, and here you can take your feet a little bit wider, about hip width, and that's usually the distance of where the front hip bone points are, so you can feel that. We'll start to get some more mobility into that whole pelvic girdle. So we're going to do a pelvic rock. This is a fairly small movement in which we start by pressing our tailbone into the ground and letting our back arch. I'm letting some space come into my lower back. You might not be able to see that because it's not a huge movement. If I exaggerated it, it would be more like this. But we're taking a little bit of movement, pressing the tailbone down, shoulder blades stay on the ground. Then in the opposite direction, we press the low back to the floor, let the tailbone scoop up a little bit, press into the feet to help you with that action. Maybe you feel the teeniest bit of air under your hips, under your pelvis. Not yet. We don't need a lot of that. So rolling back and forth here, pressing the tailbone, letting a bigger natural curve come into the lower back, and then scooping in the other direction. And again, you can do whatever you want with your arms. They can be by your side. You could even have them overhead for a little bit more stretch in the upper body. I'm just trying to rest them out of the way so that you can see my body. This might feel stiffer, it might feel more loose. We're allowing what's ever present to be there as we start to move. And coming back to the neutral, so neither curve nor arch, we'll take a few baby bridge movements. So again, finding a position of your feet. And I'd encourage you to place your feet wherever it feels comfortable, maybe a little closer to your body. I like to actually scoop my body a bit more down toward my feet for this. And then this time as we press the back of the waist down, scooch the tailbone or scoop the tailbone, we'll start to get a little bit of a lift, a little air under the hips, the bottom. And I'm not going way up, so that's why I'm calling this a baby bridge. And then coming back down. And if you'd like, as you come down, you can then make that little bit of rounded shape, that arch in the lower back. And then scoop and get a little bit of lift again. Maybe you start to feel some stretch across the front of the hips, the hip flexors. We're definitely going to target that area today. So these opening movements are simply to allow our body, our lower body, to wake up. We're focusing mostly on the area around the hips, the pelvis, the thighs today. Set back down. Do that one more time, but this time change the position of your feet. Any position. So you can try your feet closer together. I think I'm going to try my feet wider than hip distance apart. Simply put your feet in a different position. And then same thing, scoop the tailbone, rise into the baby bridge. Come right back down when you get there. Take a little arch if you'd like. And a few in this position. We allow ourselves to get curious as to what that change feels like. Does anything new or different show up for our bodies? And let's do one more round. If you'd like to hold this last one, linger for a moment, use the breath to sustain. And then on an exhale, lower back down. Okay, I would recommend having the feet a little bit closer to hip width apart for this last move that we're going to do on the floor here. I'm going to do a version of a figure 4, active and then more passive. So this is my right knee. I'm going to draw my right knee in, externally rotate from the hip joint so the right knee comes out to the side. And I'm going to send the sole of my foot toward the camera, not placing it on the bottom leg, just sending it there in the air. I'm not really able to get a huge amount of external rotation. You can see I'm trying to make my knee go out a little bit more by using the muscles around the hip. I'll hold wherever I can hold, and then from here, we'll do kind of like a bow type movement, moving the leg back and forth. So as if you're sawing or playing the violin, whichever imagery works better for you. Feeling that movement in the joint. And then one last time, keeping the leg in the air, and see if I can get any more external rotation in this active position, just using the muscles around the joint to try to externally rotate that leg. Then I'll go to the more traditional figure 4, setting down the ankle over the knee, and now using the leverage of my bottom leg, and you can see I can get a lot more external rotation by moving that knee away from my face, but I'm still using the muscles around the hip joint. We're going to keep this passive or on the ground today, not lifted up. The passive part of the stretch is using another part to help the part we're trying to stretch, which is still the right hip area. It helps increase the range. Let's take a few more breaths here. And as you come out of this, see if you can reconnect with those active muscles by lifting the leg off actively, setting it back down. Whew, that's a bit of work. And before we go to the other side, if you want to do a few gentle pelvic rocks, you can. See if the sides feel different at all. And then we'll go to the left. So this is my left leg, starting by lifting the foot. And then I externally rotate using those muscles around the hip joint. The second side always has the possibility of feeling very different. Taking the sole of the foot in the opposite direction, so away from the camera this time. First I hold, I see if I can get any more external rotation. I feel like I have less on this side, tighter left side for some reason. We'll take that movement. So I'm moving back and forth. You can actually move any which way. You could do circles. You can move the leg closer to your face and further away. Any movement is actually really good for the joint. We're trying to, like a lubrication for the joint. The bottom leg stays grounded. And let's take this top leg back into stillness. See if there's any more external rotation. Again, I don't feel like I have a lot on this side. Then allow the ankle to come to the top of the leg, and oh, there's a lot more external rotation there now. So stay here a few breaths. Feel how your muscles still are engaged. So that's not passive. The passive part is the other leg helping you move maybe a little further into the stretch, maybe a little bit more range than you had. And once again, coming out of the stretch, we're going to actively lift that top leg off. Take it back down to meet the other. Next, we're going to come up to a kneeling position. So I'm going to roll to you. And we'll come right up to a standing kneeling position. Now, my mat is pretty cushy and I'm on a carpet. If you want more cushion, grab your blanket and place that under your knees. That's fine for a little extra cushion here. So I said we're going to show a little love to those front hip flexors. This is another place where we're going to do that. I'll show you from the front and then I'll also show you this from the side. So let's place the hands over the front of the hip flexor. They're called flexors because they're often bent, right? We have that hinge right there when we're in a seated position, when we're a lot of different positions in our lives. So our goal here is to actually push that area forward, not our chest, not our belly, just the front of the hip flexors, so that we have kind of a flat line or flat-ish across the front of our body, and then let that continue to move forward as we take a little bit of a back lean. So this part is a hinging of the knees. We're letting the knees take us back a little bit further. Now I'm keeping my gaze toward the camera. If you want your head to be in line with your spine, that works too. And we're trying to hold this for a bit of time. Of course, you can come up if holding it feels too much. There's too much strain. We never want strain or pain. You can also take your hands away from your hip flexors and put them behind to help give your body a little support while still moving that part or concentrating on that part moving front in a dynamic way. So let's come up and I'll show you this also from the side. And in terms of your knees, you can either have your knees and your feet hip width. You can also have your knees wider and your feet closer together. I'll show it like that. Again, starting with the hands on the front, taking that back lean, trying not to thrust out my ribs like I just did, because we really want the stretch in the hip flexors, and as I do it this way, I'm also feeling it a lot in the quads. That's great. So it's an area that can be really hard to stretch. Remember that you can place your hands behind your hips for support if that works better for you. You might even have a prop, a table, something else nearby to place your hands. See if we can hold this for 2 or 3 more breaths. Really allowing the sensation of stretch to build, but always backing away from anything that feels like pain. All right, and then let's help ourselves up. I'll turn back around to you. We're going to come into a gate pose position with one leg out to the side. So if you're mirroring me, it's your right leg. For the grounded leg, tuck your toes under to start. Find a position that feels stable and comfortable. Your front toes might be pointing toward me or out to the side, and this leg can come a little bit in front of the plane of the body if that feels better and more stable to you. So I like to do this move with my hands either pressed together in the front or reaching out for a little counterbalance, because what we're going to do is this time we are going to hinge from the hip as we sit back toward the back foot. You don't have to sit all the way back. You don't have to touch. We're just moving in that direction. As you get back, see if we can hold for a moment and coming back up. And again, if your arms feel better somewhere else, take them to your hips or wherever as you sit back. Probably somewhere in the groin, the extended leg, you're going to feel some action. And since we have the back toes tucked, you might also be feeling some energy in the back leg. the calf, the thigh of that leg. That was 3. Could we do 2 more? So I hovered a little bit on that first one. These last couple, I'm coming down, brief second down, coming back up. All right, just 1 more. Down. And then coming back up. And since we're here in a gate pose position, let's get a little side stretch in, reaching up with your left arm and then coming long out over the extended leg. So long that you feel stretched, not just in your side ribs, but maybe all the way down the side of your hip, the side of your leg. So you notice we're including both strength and stretch work in this practice. Really, I think that's the best way to address your muscles to be healthy and strong, is to stretch them, yes, but also do some work on strengthening. Okay, let's come back up and we'll switch sides. So tucking the back toes under, extending the other leg, finding a position with the leg that feels stable, and then a position from your arms if you want to reach out that little counterweight, because now you know we're going to start to sit back in a pretend chair, in a really weird position for our pretend chair. Let's hold a little moment on this first one. And then, lots of muscular action to come back up. And we'll keep doing that little movement, sitting back toward our back foot, maybe hovering for just a moment there, coming back up and looking for that same flatness, I think is the best way to describe it. It's not really flat in the front of the hip flexor, but that same lengthening. So the hip flexors can get tight because of how we're using them all day. We're trying to get some lengthening, and this is a little bit of the stretch part. So when we move back, we're engaging all of our muscles, we're strengthening, and then we come up, we're lengthening, and this is the stretch. I think that was 4, so let's try for 1 more. Come up, get a nice little stretch in the front, and then let's also get a lateral stretch by reaching up and over. Thinking about that up first so that we can lengthen this whole side body, and then reach over. Breathe and allow your body to come back up to the standing kneeling. And we're going to finish with that same move that we started with. So you know that you can have your knees together or apart, and same with your feet. I kind of like that position with my knees wider, feet closer together, and place my hand on my front of the hip flexors. This is just an opportunity to see, does this feel any different this time? As we take that back lean, stretching across the front hip flexors, engaging in the quadricep muscles. Does it feel harder? Does it feel easier? Does it feel any different? Can we sustain for another breath or 2? And engage everything to help your body back up. All right, we're going back down to the floor. I'm going to grab my blanket to have it nearby. You won't need it for the first position, but then we're going to use it to finish out the practice. Have your blanket nearby, come back to lying. We're going to come back to a position like we were in at the beginning, with the legs bent, knees up. And we're going to do another version of windshield wipers. We started off with that really small version, now we're going to take them bigger. So this time let's take the feet all the way out to the edges of the mat. Now you can adjust a little wider or a little smaller depending on the length of your legs, but we do want plenty of width between our legs. We'll drop both knees to one side. I'm coming toward you. You can either come toward me or away from me. And we're staying. So we're not windshield wipering back and forth. We're staying here. This bottom leg is in an external rotation, and it's fairly passive, right? We're just letting it relax into gravity. You might feel more action to this top leg. So let's extend that a little bit more, engage that a little bit more. I like to put my hand in this front hip area, front hip flexor. Use the muscles of your glutes and your hips to push this leg even more. So it's like you're sending the knee in the other direction, but my shoulder is staying on the ground. So I'm making a long length from my shoulder to my knee, letting this hip, you can't see it, you'll see it when I go out to the other side, this hip is definitely off the ground. Really engaging, again, more action around our quads, around the hip flexor. Staying engaged while I'm holding and letting this bottom leg be passive and relaxed the whole time. All right, when you're ready, start to come back to the second side. I like to pause for a moment and recenter the body, recenter the feet if needed, and then let both knees come down to the second side. And now you'll have a little bit better view of how this hip is definitely off the ground even when I start, and then I'm going to exaggerate that more. I'm going to engage the hip and the glutes on this side so that this part in the front lifts even more. But my shoulder here is still on the ground, so I'm emphasizing length from this shoulder to that knee. And although I don't always give the breath reminders, of course, we're breathing the whole time. We're using our breath to help move the energy in our bodies. You also have the options, as we are holding this for a bit of time, to soften your gaze or close your eyes. And then when you're ready, come back up. So these last couple of movements are where we are going to use the blanket. I'm like my blanket in a fairly thick roll for this, so I'm actually doubling or tripling, however you want to see it up. I'm going to slide the blanket under the hips. So we're going to find a place for the blanket that the backs of the hips feel supported. I think of that as right at the top of the pelvic rim. So not into my waist is off the ground. The bottom tips of my ribs are on the ground. So see how that feels for you to have your waist elevated, but the bottoms of your ribs on the ground. Feet are flat to start. And then we're going to bring both knees in toward the chest. Now, if you need to adjust here in this position, you need to adjust the blanket. If it's digging into your waist or the waist feels uncomfortable, try sliding the blanket away from your head a little bit more. From here, we're going to keep one knee in, it doesn't matter which knee, one knee in toward your body, slide the other leg out long. It probably will not come all the way out straight, just as straight as you can make it without really overarching the back, keeping your lower ribs down. And then we want a little bit of compression of this leg against the body. So wherever you can hold, back of the thigh, front of the shin, use your hands to pull this leg in a little bit tighter. So we're encouraging that compression. You might feel tight against the top of the thigh, the belly. The whole time the other leg is stretched out long. And we're trying to hold this for about 30 seconds. I haven't been counting exactly, just trying to get a sense of that in my head. I'm guessing that's maybe about 20 or a little longer. Let's take about 3 more breaths. After your last exhale, slide the bottom leg in, bringing both knees back in, holding for a moment here. And then we'll keep the second knee in toward the chest, slide the other leg out to whatever length you can get here. Feel that length in the front of the hip flexor again. Hold this knee in toward your body. This knee never wants to come in quite as much for me. Sometimes I have to hold more on my thigh rather than on my shin. Hold wherever is comfortable, and you can loop a towel or something else around this leg if that helps you to hold the leg in. The goal is that we are trying to get that compression of holding the leg in, and again for about 30 seconds or so. Breathing the whole time. Last full inhale and exhale. And then this time we're going to let the top leg come out to meet the bottom. And this is our last pose. It's a little bit of a supported bridge. I'm actually going to move my blanket even a little further down to my feet because that just feels better for me. So a bit of an elevated, extended bridge. This can feel like such a nice release. You can use this as your Shavasana, your rest pose, by letting your feet flop open a bit. My lower ribs are still on the ground, so this is really elevating just this mid part of my body around the hip girdle. Hands can come to your side. Rest on your lower ribs to help you remember to keep them down toward the ground, or any version of the arms overhead if that feels good to you. Let's rest together here for a few more breaths. You can stay here as long as you'd like. If you liked this video and found it to be helpful, giving me a thumbs up, a like, truly gives me that information. It tells me to do more of what I'm doing. Please comment. I'm happy to ask questions. Check out the other videos that I have available, and subscribe to my channel. You'll know when my next video is coming up. Have a great rest of your day.